This conference will now be recorded.
Could you hand over the control to me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a share button on your screen?
It's grayed out.
Okay.
I have a button, but I can't hit it.
Let's see. How do I? Well, I can share mine and then maybe transfer control.
Just to get to the deck.
Yeah. Let's see if I can.
While we're doing that,
I know what I should have done. I believe.
What I can do while we're doing that is more going over today's agenda.
Sure.
So initially we will cover some of the efforts that are going on with transitioning into C-disks and how this will impact us. And after we've done that, we will actually do a more traditional work related to a change request about a bug that have been identified in the existing specification. And then, is that you or me? No, that's me.
You have it now, Alvin.
Okay, I'll try to grab it here. And then after we do that change request, and everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Put it into presentation mode. Yeah, and then we'll go into talking a little more about what we already started last time, how we engage with vendors to identify business requirements. And we'll get back to what happened then. So we'll jump into what's going on with the transition into C-disk. And we will have Q&A at the end, but please jump in at any time if you have any questions. So what I'm presenting here is very close to 100% of what we got directly from Paul, which have been involved in it. So I have so far, the group here itself have not been engaged, only Paul have on behalf of Paul Fenton on behalf of the steering committee, but he'll be leading the technology part, which will, a lot of this will be part of what we do in the exchange mechanism. So these are points from an email he shared that was also then shared internally and agreed about with the C-disks committee. So there'll be a migration of the reference model as we know it, the current spreadsheet, and they'll go into the C-disk library database. So it basically goes from an Excel into libraries in C-disks. And then there will be an evaluation of how to extend the model and mainly find out the overall control taxonomy and how that aligns the existing C-disk taxonomy and where there's overlap or alignment with the artifacts and how they'll map into the C-disk library. And then I have bolded this point out here because I think that's one of the ones that'll probably impact us the most or have the most alignment what we're doing, but that's the integration and alignment with how C-disks today operate with their implementation of industry standards and from a technical point. So this will be how do we migrate what we do, I think at least some of what we do today, into C-disk, which is part of what we'll get into later with the roadmap. And then we will see how with this we with the EMS can continue to do that with existing technical activities. And then there will be a sub-team created with the C-disk will also be part of. So we also start aligning with how C-disk do their change control process, and we'll basically this kind of meeting here will follow their protocol at that point, or to the extent that it's needed at least. So that's just what is going on at this time. So the initial deliverables they expected out of that, and this is the one I actually changed from a sequencing it was because knowledge sharing was at the bottom before and it was numbered. But I think the first thing that'll start happening is there'll be more knowledge sharing because the only thing I know about C-disk is what I have done from my own research point of view. I have not really worked there. So we'll have more knowledge transfer and insight on how it will work. And then we'll start creating a roadmap of the whole migration, what will go on. And there we need to fit in what work we're doing now into that roadmap. So this is how it will impact what we're doing now, is that roadmap. We have to put it on the roadmap. And it could be multiple parallel roadmaps. It doesn't mean we are 100, if we are not depending on the migration roadmap, we should be able to continue doing all work. And that's where the user migration will also go on or the all requirement, user requirements for the roadmap. That's where all requirements will fit in to the CDISC library. And then at the end, there'll be created a charter, and we already have a charter for what we're doing. So I think we're in a good position there at that point. It's just if there's anything else, they'll change on that. I don't know if there's any questions to that at this point in time. What is going on with CDISC, if anybody have that. The only thing I'll say is there'll definitely be opportunity, not the only thing necessarily, but there'll definitely be opportunities to join and be part of that whole migration if people are interested. So that
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they have any timing on this yet, or that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Do you know, Ken? Was there anything else mentioned with timing? I was thinking about that myself. To my knowledge, I would think it starts for sure. There'll be quite a lot of activities going on. The question is, I think the first thing, I think the roadmap will start determine that, right? When will the knowledge sharing? We should actually already have had a meeting with CDISC at one point. Was it last month? But it happened.
Well, yeah, CDISC has been kind of, taking over the presentation of the general meeting, the TMF reference model, and I think they're going to take a big role in the next one as well, according to what Paul said. But Paul, was not real definite about, what the timeline was. Just, that there will be this team formed. Paul is actually heading up the technical implementation of our migration. So he's definitely a good resource for us.
Yeah, so it definitely means we will have a good contact into it and knowledge, but we will share that as soon as we know more when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is, so what I'm showing here is literally what Paul shared with us, and then we met with him, but at that point we didn't talk about timelines. We just
we're just waiting for an invitation to a meeting when they start to put this thing together.
Which actually initially was planned, I think, last month. But,
yeah. Okay. I see Aaron has joined. We went around with the introductions. Probably Aaron doesn't need much introduction. But okay, good. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we'll do now, we have this change request that we are processing today, which are more the standard one. So, and I think I'll go, what we could do, it came out from, let's see if I can exit this here. Because what it's change request 16, and I'll just show we have the log. And at one point, we maybe should just go over or create a document that describes where different content is for the whole change request. But this here is the change request log. And what we're talking about today is change request number 16. It was Aaron that did it. He actually did it a while ago, and we're first getting to processing it now. It was the change at that point was a bigger issue that was defined here on GitHub. And there's actually multiple things in it that we'll deal with later. But the one specific thing we could process now is that it's a relationship about how the relationship between objects and file can be made. And what I will do is I'll jump, and I know I'm jumping a little around here. We're back in the specification here. And the issue, and it's probably best just to go up and how it's described in the change history. So what we're dealing with here is section 5.3.2 and 5.3.3, which is the object and file tag. And what we are suggesting to do is to move the object copy tag from the object tag down to the file tag. And the reason behind it is that there is this, this is the text description of the file tag, where it says that multiple files may be transmitted within one object, meaning when you have an object tag in XML, you can have one to or more files. Let me see what else is there. Sort of, if it's not possible to, yeah.
Yeah, basically allows for multiple renditions of a file to be sent across.
Correct. But what was today that the implementation of the object copy, meaning description of the files, was today existing in the object tag, which that should be, if that should match this here, we should have that on the file tag. Mm-hmm. So the if we go down and look at what it means from the specs down here, today this object tag, and I'll try to zoom in if I can. That's maybe not the right way. I will zoom. Let's do this. Yeah. So you can see here, I have lined this through yet. So we need to determine if this needs to go out or we leave it temporary, we get there. But this is currently the object tag we're looking at. And in the object tag today, it was saying, there we go, I jumped it again. It's saying that if you could have a copy, an object copy. So if this here was an object copy, or if it was the original. And that should be the information about the file within an object instead of the object itself. That's why we're now suggesting to move this, that the bug is that this object copy is part of the object tag instead of the file tag. So in this here, you can see it's now been moved down here, and I updated the related text so it matches the file tag instead of the object tag. Any questions to this so far? Why we're doing it? And
no, the only thing I'd ask there, Elvin, is it worth adding a little bit of additional, just because it's unlocked right now and we're making the change, right? Like, is it worth adding a little bit to the purpose of the attribute or description there, saying, you know, like this is to capture, you know, maybe other renditions of a file or native files or something like that, just to give guidance to people about what it should be used for?
We definitely can refine it. The thing I would say is that this is just the beginning of more. That's right. And I think definitely in the future we need to do more about what it is. So that's CR14, which if we go in and look at this a little, that's the description here from the original issue. They have more about that. So we need to do that as a separate one. And if we can do more guidance, I'm okay with that in there. I don't want to over prescribe, so to say, because this is a bug change and not a specification change.
Yep.
New change. I'm okay if somebody have some wording back here that we can update, but we will go more into detail with that anyhow, is what I'm saying. Because I think we need to have more description of what combinations are allowed and under which scenario we want to be able to do object copy. So my intent is we go more into detail with that anyhow later. Does that make sense?
I think we had a question. Was that you,
yeah,
Paul?
I think Paula had a question, right?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, I understand you might not want to update the definition now, but can just within the discussion in this call, can we clarify what the purpose of the attribute is? Because I think I indicated previously over email that I'm not positive our product is using this attribute correctly based on what I've been reading in the emails and reading in this document. So if we're literally talking about a copy being, for example, the PDF rendition versus the original source document, then there's some work not related to this meeting, but that I have to do to make sure we're using it correctly in our software. So it would be helpful for me to not wait until the document is updated, if that's okay.
I'll take a stab at this, Paula, at least for my interpretation, and that way, if I'm wrong, Elvin, like you're clarifying it for a couple different vendors here. So our intention in bringing this up, Paula, once again, was, if you read that file tag description up at the top, the idea of the file tag was you could have multiple copies of a file, like in a record, right? So, for us, like for our CRO clients, I think is the biggest example, right? You have an original Word document that was uploaded in, and then you probably create a PDF rendition of that, right? As part of your process. So for us, the TMF record, the one that's not the copy, so therefore when object copy would equal no, that would be the PDF rendition, right? Like the final kind of immutable document that's part of it. But if we wanted to send the Word copy along with it, we could add an additional file tag where the object copy would be yes, meaning like this is sort of object copy isn't the best word in my opinion, but we're trying to reuse what was already in the specification instead of renaming everything. So that would be my interpretation of it. I could send 6 files across with this record, but at the end of the day, only one of them should have object copy no, and that's sort of like the
original
true TMF record, right?
Yeah, and I think you brought one of the fundamental problems up even in you mentioning it. We only have 2 values here, so which technically only, if you uniquely want to identify them, allows for 2. Whereas if you have 6, what are the 6? And that's
yeah.
So with Hawaii, I'm hesitant to do too much in there, right?
So like if I was taking it further and if I was changing, we can't enforce it right now, right, Elvin? But like, I would say only one, if we're going to use the object copy as the indicator, I would almost want to change the spec to say you can have as many object copies yes as you want, but there's only one that's no, meaning there's one record. Because for us, what became troublesome, Paula, is if I'm sending a Word document and a file document, or Word document and a PDF document, but it's the same record in the TMF, where do I put the audit trail? Like, because the audit trail comes off the file tag. Where do I put signature records, things like that? We didn't want to duplicate them, 3 times because we had 3 file records. There's really only one audit trail, no matter how many copies of the file there are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to us, the reason why we brought this up is we wanted to be able to use lots of stuff in the file tag for that Word file and things like that, but we only wanted to put the audit trail in once. So by saying object copy no, meaning this is the official, this is the main PDF, right, for the TMF, that's where we're going to put the signature and the audit records and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, although if you're not exporting that original record, oh no, wait,
Well,
you're right. If you're only exporting the PDF, then it would go under the copy, correct?
this is
It would
part
go.
of
It would be. Oh, sorry, Jim. Go for it.
well, yeah. I just wanted to add because this is what we're struggling with is that some of our CRO clients they'll operate differently, where some of them want the PDF to be the source document that gets exported. So that's a rendered PDF from the Word document, and have that be the one that is basically the source of the truth. Others want to actually export out that Word document and have that one be the original. So what we're doing now is basically when they decide what they want to export, that becomes the original document, and we don't have a good place to say, okay, is a PDF rendition going to be an object copy, or what? So we don't save it in the like the repository that the Word document is either the original and the PDF is a copy. We don't do that. We make the decision at the time of export based on the need of that particular export.
Yeah,
But
Elvin,
it's confusing when you have both going into the export on how to say, well, they're really the same record, but there's two different files with it.
so
Yeah, so the intent here is just to leave the existing functionality that were there, but correct the bug, right? And I agree with everything that's been said here, that there is all these problems, but that's something I think it's too big for us to solve just in this change to fix the bug, which are why I'm hesitant. And examples of it, and if we need to get into it, and we need, which is my intent, we do. We go into more defined rules for what can you actually do. Because one of the things in the scope of the specs is that it's final record. So when you talk about you have a copy, it's clear that you can do the original in a final record. But if what is the intent of having multiple copies? And then it gets into, are these copies certified? We don't have anything in here that can indicate if it's a certified copy or not. And if that's then is the original, where in the process has it been made the original? Another element to this is if you have signatures on it, you can't really have a copy on it. So it's all these rules. If there's a signature with it, then it shouldn't be allowed to have at least a copy. So all in all, it comes down to truly to make this more precise. We need to do more work on this to improve the specification as a whole. It's just more than we can do in just a straight change request.
so that would require a working group, right?
Yes, exactly. For us to really extend this and getting it clearer, we need a separate working group.
Yeah. And then
which we intend to do, just to be clear. And it could be one of the high priorities.
Sorry, absolutely agree, and that's fine. Happy to go through whatever. I'm happy with this. I personally am happy with this change because at least it gives us a framework to establish that relationship. Barring spending a long time before we have any solution. So it gives us a way out in the short term, while gives us some time to take the time to really put the right next version of the specification in. If I'm understanding what you're saying right, Elvin.
Correct. Because as I'm saying, if you uniquely want to be able to process them without human intervention, so to say, technically you can only process two records now, a yes and a no, right? Because else you have no way of separating what is the third file or fourth file. And that we need to extend so it's clearer for sure. And what that means, and even what is within the scope of what we call final. And that, because what work can you do on the other side, and what is normally being done on the sponsor side after you have a final record, meaning do you do the certified copy afterwards, and therefore it's technically a final record we process. And the whole reason why we talk about final records and why that's such an important thing is we technically do not want really to process drafts, and it's not for, we're trying to minimize the scope so it's clear, so we actually can get something that can be automated, because the bigger the scope become until we get it sort of settled, the more complicated it becomes, and then we'll never be able to sort of automate the process. If that makes sense, right? So
yeah, I think
but it doesn't mean we couldn't at least either create a separate document that describes or maybe give guidance. And one of the guidance we definitely could do is there's on the in the normal reference model, there's what is a document around certified copies, and just give reference to that so people could read that to have an understanding of what a certified copy is from a reference model point of view. If that is to anyone's interest, I can go.
While you're looking for that, I just want to mention, I think I'd be accurate on this, that the specification has a provision for an exchange agreement. So if you're actually using this for exchange between two systems, you could probably specify your usage as part of that exchange agreement. Would that be right, Elvin?
Yeah, it's just a matter about how we describe that.
Yeah.
See how I
That
build
just
it.
provides an interim way to handle it until it's defined more
Yeah.
clearly.
I thought of.
Uh,
I'm just trying to see if I could find it fast.
you're going down there. Okay, got it.
Mhm.
But so this one actually I haven't interpreted this to be something to designate like a certified copy of a document. Is this? I kind of think of that as something that's totally separate. Is it meant to be potentially that too?
I think one of them, if you have a certified copy, then that becomes the original, right?
Correct.
And that's the question in that case. So now the question is, do you then transfer? So that could be a scenario where this could be used, is what I'm saying. Would we allow when you have a certified copy, then does the original now become a copy, and do we allow to transfer that, right? If that makes sense. So there's all these nuances to it that we need to describe, and the only reasons that I sort of wanted to refer to that is that that would also explain some of the complications we have to deal with when we define this, but also give an understanding about, why do you send an original and a potential copy? Because you maybe want to do the certification after you did the exchange.
Well, I mean, a certified copy is mainly dealing with paper, right? And the certification that the scan is now, the official record, right? So to me, that's less of an object copy field. Well, I don't know if it applies to the EMS. To me, that's something maybe either in the audit trail or in the specification of how the documents are being put together. There might be a record that this is a certified copy. I don't know how critical that would be to anybody sort of taking this TMF on. I don't know, Paula or any of the other vendors, if you guys have like thoughts or opinions on that, whether the model needs to account for certification directly, or is that just something that would be not as important to the transfer mechanism?
I just want to make sure that in here, first of all, we're clear as to what the word copy means, because in document management, rendition is a different thing than a copy. So at some point, I think we want to make that distinction in here. So because I think our export in its current state isn't doing it well. It's not taking this into account the way that I think is being described now. So,
Bob, in your export right now, do you just send the final sort of like file with the record, or do you also send maybe a word rendition or something like that as well?
I believe we can do either. Is that right? Do you know, Paul, off the top of your head, or no?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys do the same thing, sort of as we do. The authoritative record is kind of determined by whoever's doing the export to say, okay, I want the Word document to be the authoritative version and not the PDF rendition in this case, or vice versa.
Yeah, I don't think we go that far as to make that determination yet. And
Okay.
that would be an additional logic we would need to add in.
But I think it all comes down to what you're intending to do with the copy after the exchange. Why do we have a copy, right? And that because if it is already a PDF, isn't that sufficient? If this is final to be what it is, what is the purpose of this copy?
Well, I mean, one way, if we're talking about CRO to sponsor transfer, so take the situation, Elvin, where you're transferring a study mid-study, maybe with studies not completed. It's very important to have that PDF file, right, as the record for that thing. But like, let's say it's an investigator brochure or something like that. when you go and bring that over, if I want to go make the next version of the investigator brochure, right? Like I still want that Word copy is important to me to be able to go and make that next version, even though
And
it's not the
then we get
official
into,
record, but it's useful
yeah,
to,
I'm agreeing with you.
yeah.
But this is now, then it's technically not final, right? Or is it final? What is the definition of final?
Well,
Uh,
it's not even definite. It's, I mean, for us, I'm trying to translate the practicality of what we see, because from the vendor perspective, what we would love here, at least from my perspective, is yes, obviously we have a transfer agreement and things like that, but this is a pain in the industry to move TMFs between systems, right? Like it's really difficult. So anything I could do to make this as practical as we can, where it actually does real world work, first off, enhances its adoption within the industry. And second off, like accounts for the real world situations that people find themselves in. So I'm just coming at this from like our CROs want us when we're exporting files at the end of a study to include the Word files. Like we can debate whether that's useful or not. It's just what is required on us. So like just from a practical standpoint, if we come up with a spec that only puts the final record out there and doesn't have a mechanism for the Word files, that's all well and good, but we're going to have to come up with alternate ways to export things, because our clients are still demanding that, or we got to go on a big education campaign throughout the TMF community that for some reason doesn't need to be done. From my perspective, this
I'm
came
fully,
up as a challenge. This
it,
came up as a challenge, and the reason like we came to this, if I'm just reminding, is the audit. I hate getting this technical on these calls, but like you have an object record, it can have multiple files underneath it. That's fine. There was no way to specify which file is the final record versus which are just some other files you may care about or you may not. Programmatically, if I'm writing a script or a program to pull that stuff in, there was no information in the specification that would allow me to automatically know what the final record is, unless I just gave the final record. And that's the key piece of information that I think needs to be in the XML in some way, shape, or form, that allows us to have the flexibility to put that information in there, so I don't have to go to a sheet that somebody wrote to make that determination when I'm importing it into a system. Does that make sense?
yes, and I think if we translate that in, and I know it's a double negative here, and so that the critical record here, object copy, is the no one, because that's then the final one, right? I think that's
Right.
what you're also
Yeah.
referring.
I'm a realist. I'm not like like let's debate this endlessly. I just need a mechanism to do it. Like as I come from a development background, so I like in some ways I don't care the mechanism that we explained it in, as long as everybody understands it. If they need to put object
Exactly.
copy equals no, and then I know programmatically that when I see that, that's the file that I'm pulling in that I'm displaying to the user by default, that's fine.
So the attribute ID name final would have been better. And then it says,
Sure, yeah, or final copy or something. Yeah, absolutely. There's a million ways we can brainstorm to
no,
rename
but
it. There's
it
no
all
opportunity
back
to do that.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
So what that then all go back to is this about what is then the purpose of the other one and how we support it. And I think we need to be able to do it, which are why we need to be able to describe them better. But to that, we also need to have what are the scenarios of beyond the final or beyond what this one is that we are then transferring and what it means, because else you can't do it programmatically.
Yeah, absolutely. There could be, I mean, I can envision a spec in the future that has some kind of like almost like MIME type or something like that describes, okay, this is, there's codes that basically say this is the final version, this was the original uploaded version, this is the final before. I mean, I think Viva, I don't think there's anybody from Viva on the phone. I believe Viva keeps 3 renditions if you sign a file. There's the original kind of like Word file, there's a PDF that was created, and then there's the signed PDF. And for whatever reason, they might want to transfer all 3 of those. So we could come up with types. Just for me right now, the reality is like the most important thing is to just define which is the final one and which are just supporting documents, because that helps me write a program to pull that in and specify that without having to go check with a person.
That's right. And so yeah, where I'm coming from is Aaron is pretty much the same space, which is just making sure that it's described in a way that it's easily understood, so that we do it right the first time. And you know, it just, again, my experience would mean, rendition isn't really equal to copy, just in terminology.
Yeah.
And that might confuse people. It confused me looking at this. So, we can, as long as we come up with something, again, that gives you a way, just like you said, to identify what is the quote final version, explain what that is versus, uh, the source, if we're talking about a source and rendition. But then you have another use case you mentioned about certified copy. That's different. So what, how do you handle that and explain that in here? That kind of thing, again, it just needs to be documented in a way that is easily understood, so just like you said, we can build the
Maybe
export.
ask a question. Yeah. So to process this here, it's like, is it worth doing this change at this point? Or do we need to actually extend some of this for us? Because there is effort in doing this change for everybody, right? So are we better off leaving it as it is until we have a better clarity on it? Because if we anyhow will go back and do some of this change, should we do a little more work than just doing this update, is what I'm asking. Does that make sense? It's not the change blocking people.
Ken and Elvin, can I ask a question? Like, what kind of work are we talking? Like, if we wanted to change the description here,
We're changing the XML. People need to update. There can be conflicts, right? So we can process it, but it would mean we're moving it down. We need to change the XML, and people need to go through the effort to adapt it. Or
we could
say you can run an old one and a new one. There's nothing saying you need to use the latest. But if it's just a matter about if we do this change, will some people at least, adapt the new one?
Yeah, we'll certainly do it if it's needed. So that's all we need to hear, right, Elvin?
Yeah, and I know also from an effort point of view, it's clear that we need more than what is just here, right?
Yeah, we probably need to form the working group, and I think
it's better we take that extra effort, and if we anyhow have to go through it and say, okay, what we truly need here is not the copy. We need to identify the final, and then beyond that, we also need to have something that describes one or more copies, because we need to be able to describe if there's more than one copy, what is it, right? For it to be usable in a programmable way. So I'm just wondering if it's worth doing this change as it is here now. That's what I'm trying to find out, or if we should actually put more effort into it than just this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it seems like the two participants in the discussion here have been, the two vendors participating here have been IQVIA and Flex Global. So if we can have, a consensus from someone who wants to represent each one of those vendors, I think we'll have a decision. So who wants to speak for Flex Global? Aaron or Jim?
Jim, do you want to speak?
Or do you want to speak?
I think.
Yeah, go for it.
I think we prefer. Well, I think Aaron and I agree. I think we would prefer to have the object copy moved down to at least the file. I think that. I mean, I don't know. I don't really necessarily. Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I mean, my preference would be to rename it something like final rendition, yes or no, and then change the specification to say something along the lines of, only one file tag can have the specification of yes, or however we define it, I'm not married to any of that. I just, my once again, reality of me, and I'm not a good politician, is how long will it take for us to get that done versus just doing this? Because it seems like you guys were presenting this to us that this was just what we can do now and we'll do the other stuff later.
Yeah.
It just take so my target date, just to give you, for us to get this one out would be 9/16. We could do it. So this is the schedule, right? We could possibly do it earlier or later, but this is the current target date for what it is. If we do something else, we don't know. It will have to be aligned with the roadmap, right? So part of this is that this is fairly simple change that doesn't need to go through more work. I would think if we do something beyond that, it will definitely take significant more time. That's what I'm trying to say,
Well,
because this is just processing.
we need a working group, right, Paul? I mean, or excuse me, Elvin, we need to, just say something about the process here. We would need a working
Yeah,
group.
and somebody have to write it up. What should it be? And then we need to review it. I know it takes time, right? And this is not a small thing, right? And
Yeah.
then at the same time, we would probably, and I'm just, how does CDISC now deal with this? CDISC, have they already dealt with it? Now we need to go in and research that and see how they do it before we could do it, right? Which likely I could think as an outcome. So I wouldn't be surprised we'll have a challenge in getting it in this year if we do beyond that. So in the end, will it give value for us to do this change? I think is the first question. That's more what I'm getting at.
Jim was saying yes, and I think Aaron just wanted to know what the alternative was going to take, the time it's going to take.
Yeah.
So it's like between Jim and Aaron, would your consensus be this is worth it? And then I'll ask IQVIA.
I think yes, because I think I get worried it's going to be, like more than a year to get the what might be the ideal solution. In the meantime, I'd like a better way for us to be able to export out two files with multiple files with one object record and be able to more clearly have that show up in the XML. So I think yes. I don't know, Aaron, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the change in the short term that gives us a mechanism to do it versus waiting, longer. I'll balance that, with Bob and others, the fact that, you might have two specification changes coming over the next year instead of one.
Yeah.
But that would be my take on it. But I also am not the one, Jim's the one who has to schedule that into our roadmap.
Yeah.
And Bob?
Yeah, I mean, and we're chatting offline here too on this. Like we're in I think we're in alignment with Jim and Aaron on this. My concern again was around making sure that the terminology was clear, and Aaron, you even mentioned using the word clarifying around renditions, and that said, we're probably not going to be in a position to update our export software till H2.
Which are fine, right? And at least I think it's fine, at least for the intent, because you can still stay on the old one.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why we're not necessarily in a rush to get a small change,
Yep.
But that we don't want to hold things up for other vendors and keep.
No, and I think I'm hearing another thing. We need to create another subgroup, plus probably related to that, a working document that will do description of that, and part of that could be describing how the current implementation could be used and what the meaning of yes and no is, and then beyond that go in and describe what are the additional needs, so we can then frame that for a more programmatically usable solution with more than two files.
And to develop that working document would require the working group.
Correct. But the first step in it could be just to make this more descriptive, right? But as a separate document, so instead of updating the spec, we'll just have a more descriptive. Well, I think we had wording for it in the past, but it's something where we basically try to a guide to how to best use this, and when we have developed that, we can then transfer it into the spec.
Sounds good. So would this be a good time to ask for volunteers for the working group?
Just so I understand, I was a little lost. So are we deciding not to update the spec initially for now?
No, we'll do the change here, but we won't update it to much more than it is here unless people see some
When we say
conflict.
here, you mean move, so the way you have on the screen
So
have
what we've done,
object.
we have moved it from object down to file, right? So it will stay like this, but we won't extend the meaning of this and describe it more at this point, is what
Okay.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
Unless there's
that's what we need the working group for, and that's what the document would do it for.
You're going to need the XSD to be updated as well, though, as
Yes,
part of the
correct.
change.
And part of it is, as I'm saying here, because what we want to do is ensure continued operation. So will it be problematic? So one option is we leave it in two places potentially, so it could be usable. But I'm not sure that give any value. I'm just trying, because will we just move it directly down and remove it from up here? And will that cause issues for anybody? And I wouldn't think it would if you're only using it for individual transfers, so they don't use longer term. But that's the question also. Are there how should it be? How should this now be implemented in SSD beyond adding it down on file level? Do we also removing it up here, or is there any reason to keep it up in object level for short term? If that makes sense.
I don't know what that field was for when you guys originally developed the spec.
It was, I think, it was placed incorrectly. I would say it like that. It was this intent, and I think I described it. It's just a sequence of things how it happened, and therefore it by mistake got placed up here.
But it's called object copy, and it was in the object tag, and now it's on the file tag, and it's still called object copy. I mean, like, you know.
Yeah, we can also change it to
sort
file.
of making. I don't know. I keep getting myself in knots thinking through this. I want to. My goal is to actually have people.
But it is a copy of the object, right? It's not a copy of the file necessarily.
Well, then it's a strong move. Look, the more we talk about it, Elvin, I mean, at least this isn't Jim's opinion or Flex Global's, this is just mine. The more we talk about it, it just seems like we're just going to confuse more people making this incremental change.
That could be the case, yeah.
Which is why I'm questioning if we should do it, right?
Well, what we do, we don't even use it. We everything is object copy.
But if it can get value to somebody doing it, I think if it's needed for somebody, I think we should do it. That doesn't mean everybody needs to use it. Is what I'm saying.
I don't want to create burden. Look, it's hard enough getting other vendors to support this project as it is right now. I mean, you can see there's only 3 vendors on this call. And, you know, at least 2 or 3. I mean, even Paul hasn't been attending these calls from a Montreal perspective. So, you know, like, I don't think there's broad acceptance right now of this spec. I would not want to make a change to the spec to fix a technicality when it's not going to lead to more adoption or something like that. There's just not enough adoption right now that if we start using this field from a Flex perspective, that anybody else is going to make any change that's going to support it, in my opinion. So I guess I'll change my vote to say let's start, I guess, whatever process we need to start to get this fixed the right way.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. We have we can work around it for the time being.
I just, you know, whatever, this is where I don't understand the rules of engagement here for the exchange group and CDISC and everything else. I really hope this isn't something we're still going to be talking about a year from now, because I think it's to all of our detriment to the help of the industry to get this thing out there in a usable form. And, you know, I'd rather than make awareness about it in a major release or like a major change to the spec that we do have a campaign around and people understand. I just hope it doesn't take a very long time to do that. That's all I'll say. And that'll stop monopolizing.
I think most time goes into its volunteer work, and then, you know, it's getting people together and aligned. So.
Yeah, we're coming in the last 5 minutes of the meeting right now. I think it's probably a good place to break. Are we ready to say that are we ready to take a volunteer from each vendor that cares about this issue to have another meeting to put a plan together to do what's needed here?
But I think we will. I think that nearly goes into what we do in the next slide, because I think this needs to be converted into.
Okay, we can move through that real fast, but okay, so then we won't try to form that team right now. Maybe we'll try to do it, I guess, via email.
What I suggest we do is I will, because I already did some work on it, and start creating a document that we then can share, and then we'll send it out, and we'll basically just start a group and then invite people, right? And then see if there's intention to it.
Okay, yeah.
Because then if people show are willing, then we'll continue it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
So for now, we'll basically say that this one will at minimally pause or halt. I think we even maybe just reject the change as is, and just keep. So we still keep open what you started out with, Aaron, which are 14 in the change request log, but we'll actually reject this 116 here, and then we'll continue with a working group that defines it more clearly, so it's usable.
Okay.
Does it make sense? Any comments? Anything beyond that?
One little comment. Is it possible to not make it mandatory? Is it okay to have it as optional?
But I think what is meant with, because if you just, it will require an XSD change is the whole problem. So we need to do, it's not something we can just do in Word, right? That will be a change. So the question is, wouldn't you just use the no in that case, right? I would suggest in that case, just use no.
Yeah.
That's what we do right now. We just have a hard-coded script that just puts object copy equals no, and there's no logic behind that script in our system.
Then we only have one file, so that you know that the one file in there is the original.
Original, yeah. We have the same.
Okay.
And please reach out if you have questions like that. So don't hesitate if you have questions, and we'll gladly meet. But I think when we need to have more, we need to have the bigger group when we do discussions, because just doing them one-on-one just lead to more more work.
Yeah, we certainly don't discourage having individual conversations about, initial conversation that way, and then we can bring it to everybody's attention in this bigger meeting.
And just, I think this here will work actually for the end of this, which we actually, in my opinion, also can use for this this whole purpose. We had the last May 31st change control meeting where there was a presentation in there, and that brought out one example of it, that EMS is often used for export and not a transfer. So what we are trying to do is transfer these into business requirements. And I just used one example here. As a small sponsor without an eTMF with EMS import feature, I must validate the CRO eTMF EMS package. And this is just an example. We could come out of them. These need to be validated and agreed upon. And I think we can do exactly the same with the copy. We need to, whatever requirements you have, we need to try to transfer them into these requirements, and then we can process them. And with that, we can also assess if it's within the scope of the current spec or not. So that's more the intention of what we want to do. And I think we'll do that also, or not think, I suggest definitely we do this for this specific case of copy, that we describe what is it we need to be able to do. So afterwards, we know this is what then this version of a spec can do. Does that make sense? I know we're up at the top of the hour, 1 minute
We're
left.
at the top of the hour, but yeah, I mean, I think the overall message is here that we really want to do work with you to identify your requirements and to do what's needed to address them. So we'll work this process out over time too. So any other questions before we go? Comments? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
And probably have another meeting within a month or so, I'm guessing.
Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.